We started out as an in-person meetup group in New York City, but once the pandemic hit, we expanded out to virtual events, and now we're kind of nationwide a little bit. We talk to people, we connect people in LA, California in general, Texas, Georgia, New York, Chicago. And the purpose of the group is to bring together Salvadorans of the diaspora that may feel a little bit disconnected from their roots and their culture. It's kind of a way for us to come together, support each other, and learn about ourselves in a community environment. And so we host happy hours, general happy hours. We also have a book club. We have a film club where we watch Salvadoran films or read books regarding about El Salvador or dealing with El Salvador or just general Latin American history. We also have a podcast where we interview interesting and fun and cool Salvadorans so we can get an idea of how diverse our population is. We're not just monolithic people. And yeah, that's it. I'm happy to be here and happy to be part of this event. I'm glad I got to connect with Tequeria and meet more Salvadorans. The objective of Salvis Unidos, like I said, is just to connect as many Salvadorans as possible so we can all learn and grow together.
Yeah, so Norma, if you want to kick us off.
All right, how's everybody doing today? Everybody good? So my name is Norma Perez, and I was born in the late 70s here in East LA in a car in front of the hospital. So kind of a, kind of a bam, So my parents, or my family, they came in the late 70s and early 80s. Now, from what my mother was, what she pretty much was mentioning to me was that she came first with my dad and, my sister because, with the whole Civil War going on over there and just a lot of people, everything that was going on, they wanted to come over here to obviously, have like a better opportunities and everything. And so from what I was told is that they had came in like 76. And then from there, my dad actually was captured and he was sent back again. And so, but my mom and my sister were able to still continue. And it's interesting because I was asking my mom because I told her like, you know what, nobody's ever told me like the story of you guys coming over here. And so, me dice, ay, mija, si nomás, hubieras visto. I think it was, she said, a little bit harder back in the day, to come here to the United States. Pero que she had to then go back because she wanted to bring the rest of my siblings here, to bring them over here. And she did tell me that in one time when I think when she was in Tijuana, that she, I think, was trying to get her passport. Was it Tijuana? I'm not sure if it was Tijuana or somewhere in Guatemala, that she was trying to like get her paperwork done or something, and that she went by herself. And de que vio un camión, y ese era un camión that was like basically secuestrando a las mujeres, and that there was this white car that was there, and she quickly, went behind. And so she me estaba diciendo que pensé que ese carro que era como mi ángel guardián, because that car, el camión, did actually stop. And she was saying, imagínate si nadie me hubiera visto, no, si ese carro no estuviera allí, me hubieran capturado and nobody would have known because I went by myself. And so, she's telling me all this stuff, and she said that my sister went through some worse things. My oldest sister, I just started to cry because I thought like, wow, they've gone through so much just to try to make a better living, and to come here to be, sort of confronted with the racism and all the stuff that goes on acá con nuestra gente, it's a lot, I know for myself. And I was born, like I said, in LA. Now, I don't know how it is in the East Coast, but I know, and this is one thing that I've mentioned before, that a lot of us have gotten sort of like bullied out here. And for saying that we're Salvadoran. And then especially me, I don't really I look ambiguous. I look mixed. I look Puerto Rican, you know, soy afrodescendiente. And so, you know, when people would ask me like, oh, well, so where are you from? Are you Puerto Rican? And I'm like, no, mi familia es del Salvador. And then people would be like, oh, you're Salvi? And it's like, even just the way, like, again, I don't know if some of you guys can relate, but then when people would be saying things like, you know, okay, you guys, the language that you guys, your dialect and how you guys talk is bien vulgar. And it's something that I think for me when I was younger, and I, you know, just saying it straight out, I did feel kind of embarrassed to say that I was Salvadorian because of these people bullying me and like, oh, you're Salvi, you know? And for me, I didn't have that pride as much because my family didn't show that pride as much. I mean, we would go to los restaurantes, agarrar pupusas, ya saben, toda comida, you know, que está bien riquísimo. Pero otherwise than that, it's like they never really showed that pride and they never really told me about the history. So aquí yo voy and I'm, you know, feeling this sort of like, I don't know where I belong, you know what I mean? And so for me, I think I didn't get that pride until I founded my business. So for those of you that don't know my business, I do Salvadorian vegan food. And so, you know, that kind of sounds like, what, Salvi, vegan? That doesn't go together. Yes, it does. Well, curtido, tamal de lote, you know, we got some of that stuff. And it's, I think around 2016, you know, I started to create this because I became vegan in 2015. And I was like, I don't want to lose that culture, that tradition, you know, that I had, you know, that flavor, yes, that flavor is sabor de sazón, you know. And so I just thought like, what can I do to like make this food? And so I started to ask my mom. And so, you know, como son las mamás, ¿verdad? Que they would be, you know, si le dice, oh, mamá, you know, ¿cómo hace, you know, la comida? Ay, yo qué sé, tú échale, tú nomás pruébalo y ya. Nomás un poquito de eso y un poquito de aquello. And I would feel like, mom, no, pero necesito saber, you know, so like I can get her sazón in there. And so finally I was able to like create a lot of the stuff and I had gotten even to like 10, 15 dishes. And, you know, then I was like, I have to create this, you know, and then the fact that my mom would actually try some of the food and she would be like, no, misa, pues te quedó bien rico. And I was like, yo, I got my mama's approval. I think I'm good, you know? So for me, it was just like, I got to do this, you know? And at first, when I started that business, it was more of like, you know, making vegan Salvadorian food. But I think it's, as I delve more and more into the history, into where our people come from, I was just like, this is much more than just that. You know, it's much more than just making vegan Salvadorian food, you know? So, but on me, I think that's where I started to get more of that pride, you know, and it just became a lot bigger. And so for me, that's the reason that it's like from everything that I've heard from like my mom and, you know, my dad and my family. And now it's like, and to tell you guys the truth, it seems like I'm the one that has more of the pride than they do. And I'm the one that was born here, you know, and it's, I'm like, you know, así saben la familia, pues, you know, en veces no cambian o no quieren decir, you know. Even like for me making this food, you know, me dicen, ay, ¿por qué tanto pones esa comida ya, you know, en el internet? You know, I'm like, they don't understand, you know, but I always try to tell them like, look, I'm trying to retain those ancestral traditions just in sort of a different way, you know? And so, and I even tell them, I mean, I don't know if you guys know, but the first pupusa that was made was actually plant-based and it was called pupusawa. And it was actually made of like chipilín, squash flower blossoms, hongos, y sal. And it was actually in half moon shape. That was the first pupusa. It wasn't it wasn't until the colonizers came and brought the cheeses and the meats, and that's the reason why we have, you know, los pupusas de, you know, the queso y the chicharrón. So with that, it was just like, no, I need to bring the history. of our people and just really retain that culture and that pride, you know, and bringing it into a new format. So I think with that, if there's more questions, you know, but if not, I will then pass it on to the next persona.
Thank you, Norma.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we're gonna leave Q&A for the end, so that everyone gets a chance to speak. So yeah, Carlos, go ahead with your story.
Other Carlos.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I always get confused.
Salvi problems.
Yeah, I swear. Yeah, as mentioned, my name is Carlos Castillo. Y'all can call me Carlitos, though. I prefer that. Yeah, and my story, I guess, is about like family, my involvement with tech, and the connection I derive to my family history actually from that. So my story starts out, I guess, like most of y'all, like my parents were immigrants, and they were refugees, right? Like who wasn't that was living in that era during the war, like not a refugee. Even if this government didn't want to acknowledge us as or them as refugees, they still were by pretty much any other definition. So my parents are refugees, and they met one summer through a friend. My mom would visit this colonia like frequently for this one friend, and she introduced her to my father. And my mom was the first to flee to the U.S. So during that time, my mom and dad would stay in contact with each other with like love letters that they'd write, like old school as all heck. So that's how the relationship cultivated, and it happened around the same time too that they got to know about each other too when she was entering high school. So my mom goes to high school, ends up going to college to Northeastern as well, and ends up getting married to my father. So it's not all as happy as that sounds, though. My mom is actually hard of hearing, so it was really hard for her to go to school, especially in El Salvador back then when there were like limited resources for hearing impaired folks. So even here in the U.S. at the time, there wasn't that much. But despite everything, despite not understanding the language, despite not being able to always hear what the lecturers were saying, she almost graduated from Northeastern. She was one class away from graduating, but she ended up getting convinced, unfortunately, by my dad to marry and drop out of school. So it didn't work out like it's common today. And yeah, I lost my mom after that, shortly after, not to death or anything like that. She actually ended up developing a bunch of mental illness problems. She developed schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So I ended up losing her to homelessness when I was still in high school. And I still haven't like seen her. Like I've talked to her on the phone, like in the process of losing her, but I haven't seen her like had a connection with her since. And yeah, so bringing this back to tech, when my mom was in Northeastern, she was actually studying for her CS degree. And my uncle told me that she did this because at the time, she didn't know any immigrant women who, especially were hard of hearing, who were doing CS. And she wanted to do it to prove to everyone that she could do it. So it was always a little bit sad to our family that she never finished. But I never knew any of this, right? So you're a little kid, you grow up, how often are you asking your mom and dad, like, hey, how did you guys meet? Hey, what was your life like? Like, why are you doing what you do now for work, right? All I knew is my dad was a janitor and a cook, and my mom worked at a call center, you know, doing claims. So anyways, flash forward, I go to college. My mom always wanted me to be an engineer. I never really knew what an engineer was, and I did try it out as an electrical engineer. It wasn't my thing, so I switched to business. And there was this one pivotal trip I took to El Salvador. It was actually for an internship. Pasantía at the Marriott in the Grand Plaza in the capital. My aunt procured that for me. So when I was there in the motherland, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that 90% of my family is still in El Salvador, right? So I wanted to get to know them, and more importantly, get to know like our family history and the history of my parents, like how they even met in the first place. I didn't know that. I got to see the church that they got married at. We drove by there and everything. And apparently the wedding dress and tux that my mom and dad wore, because they were still broke, they borrowed from my aunt that I was staying with. And then later, when my dad's sister got married a couple years later, they all are the same tux. So somewhere in our family, we still have that tux that pretty much everyone on the male side of the family have gotten married in or lent to the spouse to use as well. So who knows, maybe one day I'll fit into it. But yeah, so when I was there, I learned about all these crazy things about my parents, about my grandmother, about my great grandmother, all these incredible things. And I learned that the women in my family have always forever held things down. And actually, that's something that I've always like drawn inspiration from before I took this trip, was the fact that like my mom always worked so hard, and so did my grandma, and that she and her mom, my grandma, were the ones that always provided for us. And I drew a lot of my values, I guess, from them, and growing and avoiding all the traps that, you know, statistics say that someone like me who grew up the way I did should have fallen prey to, right? So during that trip is when I start learning more about my family history. The year later, I graduate, and I end up in this really unhealthy work environment. I don't want to like name names, but like it was in finance, and I was just miserable. I felt unfulfilled. Management didn't seem too excited about me ever leaving my role because someone's father like died when I joined the company. So they just pigeonholed me into that role as they left, and the company was transitioning of also getting rid of that role. So it was like this dead end job that I was really scared about, like eventually getting fired for. So I was really stressed, and I was just thinking about all the different possibilities to get out of that situation. I was so desperate. So I was even considering a career change. And at the time I talked to my mentor, and I wanted to do something that I felt was engaging, that could enable me to help others. And I thought about all the times that I was helped, and it was always my teachers growing up. So I decided to go into education. And she, my mentor, herself was an educator, and she highly advocated against that. She doesn't want that life for any of her students, she says. And she said that if I did want to give something like that a shot, that I should go to Korea or Asia to teach, because A, the job provides enough for you to not starve. So that's a huge plus. B, it's a great way to see if I like teaching in a more favorable environment before I decide to come back and try this on hard mode, right? So when I was there, though, I was still scared that, like, what if education is not it? Because I know how bad it is in America. So I started to teach myself programming. I bought the book Learn Python the Hard Way by Zed Shah. Look him up on IG. He's actually a very talented painter. I got his book, and I went from zero to like being able to code. And I spent 3 years there in Korea. And I remember when I was there, this connection, like this spiritual connection that I felt to my mom, because growing up, I used to hear so many times about how hard it was for her as a refugee / immigrant, like transitioning, right? She used to say, this was the thing that stood out to me the most, when she first came to this country, it was so stressful for her, leaving everything that she knows and loves behind, having to do with the language barrier, that her hair would fall out from the stress. And this is like a woman in her 19, 20, 21, like very young, right? So healthy. And yes, God, let's learn Python the hard way. Yeah. And she was just so stressed by that, right? And I remember the kid, like you process it, but you can't really like fully wrap your head around it. And I was like, wow, that sounds pretty intense. And when I was in Korea, I had similar experiences. I remember she used to talk about how much of your autonomy is taken away when you're moved to another country, and especially when there's that language barrier. Like, I mean, I went from being so, what's that word, self-conscious because my parents were immigrants, and that I was growing up in that household, that others would think I wasn't good enough. So I would watch Frasier with like an electronic dictionary as a kid, and like try to learn as many words as I can. I would ask for extra vocab words for the SAT prep classes that I took to make sure that I could master this language English better than anyone else who says that they're a native speaker as well, right? To now being in a country where I don't know a lick of Korean, I can read it, but I don't know any vocabulary, let alone grammar. And I can't even go to the doctors by myself. I would have to ask coworkers or friends to do me the solid of acting as interpreter, right? It was this huge change of like having a sense of autonomy and like confidence in yourself to being like, I'm so powerless and I'm so dependent and I'm so just limited in everything that I can be, do, and express myself, right? So all those experiences that I had would remind me of all different stories that my mom would tell me. And it just gave me the courage to power through. But my last year, I ended up developing an autoimmune disease where I thought it was because of the dust, but I think it's just because of like these excessive amounts of cortisol levels that I had from being in a stressful situation where I developed psoriasis, like really, really bad psoriasis. Like I know you guys can probably see some of my head, but it's all over my body. And it was to the point where I'd scratch and bleed and not be able to sleep at all. So I left, and it reminded me that story I told y'all before about how my mom's hair would fall out, right? Like I was just like, wow, doing this is so much harder, right? And that's me coming as an American with a position of status where I get to keep my degree, because my father actually had a degree in El Salvador, but he lost it and now ended up working as a cook when he came here. Working in a position where I'm not frowned upon or looked down upon, right? Teacher status, or being able to provide for myself fully. To compare that to my mom, I just felt like it's different, but so similar too. And it, even though I don't have that connection to her anymore, like physically, it's so, I would think about her a lot during my time there. So anyways, I come back to the States, this is about 2 years ago, and I'm trying to get a job in tech now because I realized the teaching thing it was fun. I super grateful for the experience. I love my time there, but it's definitely not for me in the States, especially. So I'm like studying extra hard, trying to pass all these technical interviews, and then getting this job in tech at Outco, where right now I actually help engineers like pass their technical interviews, because I remember how frustrating that experience was. It's like I can build something, but your interview process is right. So in that process, it took about a year to get that job. And a lot of my family, when they realized I was trying to break into tech, would tell me, you know, your mom actually studied computer science, and she was a whole semester away from finishing, blah, 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 blah. And she just wanted to do it to prove that she could. I remember when I learned that, I felt, again, more connected to her. And like, again, the women in my family were looking out for me. That the fact that like all the female ancestors I've had are the reason where I am today. And not as directly as my mom, just one generation ago. Me and her still have this connection in tech where, you know, again, hard of hearing immigrant, but tech just lets anyone in. And she really, I remember she was always good with computers, but I never knew why. I thought it was like an adult thing, but now I'm the tech guy. Now I'm helping my girlfriend out whenever she has problems with her stuff. I'm helping my neighbors like secure their networks, because who does that? And I don't know, I guess every time I get to learn something new, I'm currently in grad school myself, and it's brutal. And if I'm being honest, I kind of hate it because it's just so much harder than it needs to be, because I feel like that's just the way education is in this country. But every single time I cut my teeth on these things, every single time I build something cool or I use my skills to help someone, I remember my mom, and it's probably the last connection I have left her outside of my memories. And I'm just super grateful for that. And I'm super grateful that because of that connection to her now, I found Tequeria, right? Because I was in search of community. I was in search of people who had walked the path that I was hoping to walk, right? So yeah, I'm just really grateful for that. And I feel like every day that I'm doing this thing with tech, that I do this thing with school, I'm just, not to like gas my stuff up, but it reminds me of that expression of, you are your ancestors' like wildest dreams. And I feel like that's true to an extent, because if my mom could see me now, I think she'd be happy and hopefully proud of who I am and the things that I've done, and all praise is due to her. And yeah, so yeah, sorry for the burp ending, but that's my story.
That was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
sure.
Carlos, thank you for sharing. And yeah, we as a community are super proud of you as well. You know, like, you know, we all know how hard it is to just go through life with our history. And so yeah, absolutely. We're proud of you as a community.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yeah, so Jose, you wanna go next?
Hi, my name is Jose Duarte. I was born and raised in El Salvador. I moved here for college when I was 19. I started off my career in social media, working at a website called OMG Facts, where I helped grow that to, at the peak, we had hundreds of millions of visitors a month. And now I'm the head of marketing at Boro, which is a fintech startup that began by helping international students get car loans here in the US. And now we've kind of broadened that mission to kind of help every college student achieve a better financial future. But today I didn't want to talk about myself. I wanted to talk about my great uncle, Jose Napoleon Duarte. He was my grandfather's brother. And he was president of El Salvador from 84 to 89. Before we get into it, kind of just, I try to collapse kind of like 40 years of history here. So hopefully I don't bore you too much. But, in the 60s, he was a founder of El Partido Demócrata Cristiano, the Christian Democratic Party. And he was mayor of San Salvador for 3 consecutive terms. Then in the 70s, he ran for president, and he had his election stolen by the military, and he was, captured, tortured, and sent to exile. And then he finally came back in the 80s after there was a coup that kind of ended the military dictatorship, and he came back to be the head of the Junta Revolucionaria de Gobierno, which was the kind of the body that was governing in the transition. And then he finally ran for president and won a term between 1984 and 1989. While he was president, he was diagnosed with stomach cancer, and he passed away in 1990. So he died when I was just like 4. So, he met me, but like I didn't really meet him. I met him mostly through, family stories. We would gather and just tell stories about him. And being here in the States for so long, I think kind of just growing up, I've been doing a lot of research to kind of compare how real history compares to the family history. And I thought I'd share some of that with you. Because I think one of the things that kind of struck me the most, kind of coming from El Salvador, joining Taqueria and also Salvis Unidos is just, how much Salvadoran history, can mean to a lot of people. So hopefully I can share something that you didn't know. So let me kind of giving that as an introduction, kind of take it all the way back to the beginning. He was born in 1925 to kind of a working class family. His mom was a seamstress and his dad was a tailor. They had very little economic resources when he was born, so much so that his older brother, my grandfather, was actually being raised by a neighbor who had more means, and actually things of life, as we say in El Salvador, because my kind of that advantage that my grandfather had helped my uncle too. For example, when my grandfather got enrolled into a private school, my great grandmother kind of went to the monks that ran it, and it was like, you're going to give my other son a scholarship too, and he did. As they got older, they got my uncle and I think my grandfather too got involved in the student-led protests that overthrew Maximiliano Hernandez Martinez, who was kind of the longest military dictator that El Salvador had. But obviously his parents weren't too happy about it, so they actually shipped them off to the US, both of them. My grandfather came to Notre Dame, the University of Notre Dame, which is in Indiana. And a couple of years later, my uncle kind of also followed him. My grandfather was sent by the family that raised him, and then this is kind of where the family history and the legend kind of start, because the story that my family says is that my uncle's dad won the lottery, and that's how he was able to come study here. And there's some truth to it, but the time didn't match up very well. Like a lot of people, he came without knowing any English. And because of that, he actually made a very significant friendship. There was a priest at Notre Dame who was just starting. His name was Father Hesberg. He was a teacher, teaching one of his first classes at Notre Dame. And, my uncle didn't understand anything that he was saying. So he would talk to a classmate and be like, hey, can you translate? Hey, can you translate? And the priest eventually noticed, and he's like, hey, if you don't shut up, I'm going to throw you out the window. That quieted him. But then the priest asked him to stay after, and he explained to him, in whatever English my uncle could muster, told him, I just can't understand you. And then that priest actually would stay after class every time, and he would recite the class back to him in Italian. And that was close enough to Spanish that he would catch some stuff. But what actually developed out of that, and I'll get back to Father Hesburgh later, but Father Hesburgh was kind of a huge influence in not just his life, but you'll see in the history of El Salvador too. But he came back to El Salvador to form a family. He married his sweetheart. He was a civil engineer, so he actually built, construction was kind of a booming business in El Salvador at the time. And I don't know exactly what all he built, but I know, some big hospitals, bridges, government buildings. He was kind of his firm was one of the ones that built it. But then a couple of things happened that caused a big change in his life when he was around 35. The first was the Cuban Revolution. So that kind of spooked everybody in Salvadoran society and everywhere, like, oh, this could happen here too. But the second thing that happened was Father Hesburgh came to visit all of his alumni all over Latin America. Father Hesburgh had actually gotten involved in the Civil Rights Commission, and he was one of the writers of one of the Civil Rights Acts that got passed here in the States. And he was kind of, appalled by the conditions of El Salvador, and he kind of shook all of the Notre Dame alumni that he visited, and he said to my uncle specifically, he told, like, it's not enough for you to build roads and bridges, like you have a moral responsibility to do something about your country. And he took him up on it. Soon after, he was one of the founding members, like I said, of the Christian Democratic Party, who was inspired by Catholic social teaching, which leave the social stuff aside, at least on the economic side, it was quite progressive. And they kind of saw themselves as, an ideological alternative to the military and kind of what they saw as a communist threat, regardless of what you think of that. Like I said, he was elected mayor of San Salvador in 1964. He tells the story of how scared people were of supporting him because they didn't want to be seen supporting somebody that wasn't officially, part of the military ruling party. But through, hard work and grit, he got elected, and he did a lot to modernize San Salvador. He was the one who installed electric lights all over the city. He also started an adult education program for people to get their GEDs and kind of get retrained. And he built a new marketplace downtown. I probably don't have time, but he also, if you've ever heard the soccer war in 1969, he had a little bit to do with that. He had a role to play there too. In 1972, he ran for president. And he didn't think that he would win, but the Christian Democrats were kind of on the up and up, and they thought if he was at the top of the ticket, he was very popular. People had a slogan that they chanted, which, I think now you would say that's a little bit of populism, but people would say, con Duarte, aunque no me arte, with Duarte, even if I don't eat. So they thought, if he's at the top of the ticket, he's going to have a down ballot effect, and we're going to gain more seats in the assembly and the mayorships, and we're going to be able to, reform the country. They really wanted to make changes so that the military would ease up power, open up the society, and then hopefully avoid a revolution is how they saw it. The military knew it, and they were afraid of that. They actually moved the presidential election forward by a month, and they left the mayorships and the National Assembly elections a month later, so that they wouldn't have that big of an effect. The campaign itself was pretty violent. A few campaign workers were killed by the military, and my uncle escaped a couple assassination attempts. I think at least one this one time. When the votes were counted, based on the projections, they thought, my uncle thought, oh man, we might win, but kind of on parallels to recent history, when the military saw that, they stopped the count. They took the ballot boxes away, they stuffed them, and they said, actually, nobody won. Nobody got more than 50% of the votes. People kind of knew that it was fraud. Everybody kind of was powerless to stop it. And the Constitution at the time said, nobody gets 50% of the vote. It goes to the legislature. And of course, they were full of people, that were sympathizers of the military, so they gave it to the other guy. This came to be known as El Fraude del 72, the fraud of 72. And it was one of the kind of the big turning points in Salvadoran history where a lot of people stopped saying, okay, like these people are never gonna, the military, these people are never gonna give up power. The democratic process is not gonna work. We need to do something more about it. Some of the FMLN groups kind of trace their origins to these events. There was another even bloodier fraud in 1977, but my uncle was in the country, as I'll say in a minute. But like I said, at the time, people were really angry about this, and a group that also got angry was a younger reformist faction of the military. And one thing to understand about the Salvadoran military is that they saw themselves, as brutal as they were, they saw themselves as kind of the mediator between capital and workers. And so they were always trying to straddle a line of like, how brutal can we be without inciting a revolution that like doesn't hurt the bottom line of the people with money too much. So a lot of the coups that happened in El Salvador were from younger officers who were like, okay, you guys at the top, you're too old. You don't, you're not gonna prevent this catastrophe from befalling upon us. So we're gonna have a coup and kind of take over. So this happened this time in 1972, except so a young colonel called Benjamin Mejia, he launched a coup and they got close, but they weren't able to hold on to power. At some point, Benjamin Mejia, he called my uncle and asked him, hey, can you come out and support the coup? We think that you were the rightful winner. We think we want to, once this is over, we'll either give it to you or you can call for new elections or whatever. My uncle was hesitant. At a rally after his loss was declared, he sensed a lot of anger in the people, but he tried to channel people's emotions into voting in the next elections that were going to be next month. So he was a little hesitant to join, but he eventually agreed to get on the radio, and he asked people to barricade the entrances to San Salvador so that the military couldn't send reinforcements from elsewhere in the country, and in general, just telling people to keep safe. He thought he wasn't, he thought he was doing the bare minimum without actually calling for violence, but that didn't quite matter. He was still captured. He was actually hiding at an ambassador's house, and the military broke down the house to drag him out, and they kept him in a dungeon for a few days. However, my great aunt worked the phones, or actually my grandfather called Father Hesberg at Notre Dame, who by the time had made so many connections. He got high enough people in the US and I think in Panama that they were able to pressure the military to not kill my uncle and just sentence him down to just exile. And so they sent him to Venezuela, and he was there for 7 years, from 72 to 79. And in the meantime, things in El Salvador deteriorated quite a bit. There was a fraud, like I said, in 72 and 77. Tensions were rising really high until in October of 1979, a similar coup happened again, but this time, this was finally kind of the end of the military dictatorship in October 1979. And so that's when they established a Junta de Gobierno, which was a 5-person committee, basically, that was the head of state. There were a few configurations of it because they couldn't get it quite right, but they eventually, the Christian Democrats and the Carter administration kind of called my uncle out of Venezuela, and they told them, you kind of have to come back and do this because nobody else can do it. I think that's debatable. And I think one of the things that I'm trying to process is, because when that happened, the military was part of the junta too. So he was kind of throwing in his lot with the military who had stolen the election from him. And by all accounts, if you look at any of the reports, the military did the worst of the violence in the war. But I think kind of, reading his book and talking to my family and reading history, kind of the calculus he was making is, it's either El Salvador falls to the guerrillas, in which case, the US isn't going to let that stand because you see what happened in Nicaragua. Or on the other hand, if you don't join, El Salvador was very divided, and there was a very popular far right candidate that could have won, and their agenda was, we're just gonna get rid of the guerrillas one way or the other. So he kind of saw no good options and came back as kind of like in the center, for lack of a better word there. He was head of the junta, and they kind of had a very tough job of trying to pass a bunch of reforms. There was a land reform that got passed, and they wanted to run elections to write a new constitution. The other thing that to mention, one of the things in the research that I've been doing, one thing that can't be overstated is how damaging the switch from the Carter administration to the Reagan administration was in terms of how they handled the war. An author I read basically said, when Reagan came in, everybody that was in charge of military aid in El Salvador was basically like Vietnam 2.0. And so that was one of the things where he came in under Carter, but then kind of Reagan took over, and then at that point it's just like, well, if we don't do what they want, they're not going to help the military, and the military maybe should be disbanded. But if there's no military, what's going to happen? So that was kind of the rock and a hard place that he kind of felt himself. But overall, I think the junta was at least successful in running free and fair elections since the 1983 elections. I would say every election in El Salvador has, for the most part, been above water on the table, no fraud or anything like that. And the Constitution, El Salvador's had a bunch of constitutions, but the one from 1983 is still the one that we're still using today. So the junta gave power to a temporary president while there was another presidential election that he ran in under the Christian Democrats. But like I said, the country was very divided at the time. And his main rival was a former military officer named Roberto Davison. He was also the founder of Arena. It was widely known at the time that he was the leader of the death squads that were terrorizing the people, and that he was probably the one who ordered the death of Archbishop Oscar Romero. So that's who he was. That's who he was running against. And despite this, he was quite popular, and he would get on TV and he would accuse people of being communist, and then they would show up dead a few days later. And their platform, I think it was best summed up by the party's official anthem, which to this day it still says that El Salvador será la tumba donde los rojos morirán. El Salvador will be the tomb where the Reds, the communists, die. On the other hand, the Christian Democrats were running on a campaign of peace talks, economic and political reform. Ironically, the U.S. also got involved in that election, and very similar to kind of what we heard in 2016 and 2020. And this is something that I can't quite get my family to talk about yet, but the CIA allegedly set up an ad agency that ran propaganda in favor of my uncle. It wasn't large scale enough that I can believe that my family, when they say they don't know anything about this, but it's pretty well documented. And I think that's kind of where you see the needle that even the U.S. was trying to thread of how much do we support this country, but like we don't want the far right military guy that says he's going to kill every communist to win. But the campaign happened, and then, like in the first election, neither candidate ended up winning a majority. But this time the Constitution allowed for a runoff, and so he won in the runoff. Now, he came into power. Finally, I come to when he's president. So sorry for taking so long. But like I said, his main goal was he wanted to end the war through peace talks with the guerrillas. Kind of contradictory because, obviously at the same time he was commander-in-chief of the military, but the military was also, kind of its own thing, and they never really listened to him. That was one of the kind of the things that undid him at the end, that he was never able to reform the military in the amount and the sense that he wanted. But the pitch to the guerrillas was, the issues that you went up in arms for are either resolved or in the process of being resolved. So, he asked them to rejoin the political world and run for elections. From his point of view, the guerrillas were just asking for too much. They wanted Arena to be banned from running in politics. And I believe they also wanted to kind of run the government provisionally before calling for elections. And, that was just a non-starter. So that's one of the reasons why the peace talks kind of stalled for a long time. And then on the right, he also faced capital flight. There was a lot of people said, the rich are running El Salvador from Miami at the time. They passed a lot of, I would say almost progressive things in a way. Like there was a luxury tax to pay for the war, like all luxury imports were taxed, and the government nationalized the banking system because so much money was fleeing El Salvador. So that those things weren't that popular, and ended up spending a lot of his political capital. But then things kind of took a quick decline because his daughter, my aunt, was kidnapped by the guerrillas, and obviously she ended up being released. She ended up fine, but it was a prisoner swap, and the political cost was really high for him. In 1988, almost towards the end, he was rushed to Walter Reed Hospital here in the States, and he was diagnosed with terminal stomach cancer. He didn't want to resign, and one of the things that I've found is I think he had a big ego. He kind of bought into like the big man theory. So like he wanted to be the first democratically elected president to hand power to another democratically elected president, which he did in June 1989, but he passed less than a year later. So that's kind of his life in a nutshell. But I think before I end, the biggest lesson that I've learned so far, I think, is the importance in politics to build alliances and coalitions. I think that's something that he wasn't particularly good at. A lot of it was just from distrust of his allies. He had so many assassination attempts, but at the end he kind of ended besieged from both the left and the right, and he didn't really have a lot of allies. And I think the best example of that was one of the last things that he didn't do, but he proposed was at some point when the Berlin Wall fell, the guerrillas came to the table and they said, basically they said, we don't think that we're gonna be able to win. So if you delay the 1989 presidential elections by 6 months, we'll form a political party, we'll run for office, and lay down arms. And obviously that was against the Constitution to do. He couldn't unilaterally just concede to moving the presidential election. So he proposed to the legislative and the Supreme Court to do that, let's delay the elections and let the FMLN come in as a political party. But by that time, he was not that popular anymore, and the National Assembly had been won by Arena, and they just simply said no. And the war ended up going for 2 more years because of that. So take that for what you will, but I think that I think to me that's kind of a lesson of like that's why you need to know how to form coalitions.
That was great. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for the history. I love history, and I don't know very much about Salvadoran history. So yeah. So yeah, we can open it up to Q&A for all the speakers. If anyone wants to jump in with a question, either just yes, unmute yourself or toss it in the chat. I guess I'll start. Jose, I heard you say like in my research quite a few times. So is this stuff you're reading and not getting from your family directly?
It's a mix. It's a mix of things. Like I said, I think one of the things that has struck me interacting with a lot of I guess, U.S.-born Salvis has been kind of, there's a black hole of information and history about Salvadoran history, and I think it's really interesting. And there's a lot of, El Salvador is like really small, and there's so few players kind of in politics that I think all of that political history is actually really interesting, because you don't, there's not 1,000 people to keep track of. So a lot of this, like I said, has been kind of reflecting back on all the stories that I heard growing up, and then yeah, just picking up a few books and checking things against what I heard. For the most part, I think, obviously my family is not unbiased observers, but for the most part, everything that I heard growing up was checked out.
Okay, that's cool. I think I saw, let me see, I saw a question in here for Carlos. How was your transition back to the States from Asia?
Oh man, I feel like the biggest thing that my friends criticize me is I never shut up about how much better life was abroad than it is here. And that's just for like a bunch of reasons. I just feel like infrastructure here is like a lot harder for people that don't have a car. Obviously, access to healthcare, especially someone who's sick. I think the biggest thing though was the fact that, like, in Korean culture, there's this concept called Jung, like Carl Jung, but with a J. And it's just this collectivistic idea that actually, I always say, like, Latin folk have, like, we're a very collectivistic people. And I think that Koreans have that similar overlap. I actually used to call like Korean culture and like Salvadoran culture like cultural cousins, because even the kimchi is like our curtido, but just spicy. And I miss that, even though I was a foreigner. And this is again the comparison of like how much harder my mom had it. You know, as a foreigner, Jung dictated that they should look out for me. So my butcher, who, when he heard that I was all alone, I didn't know anyone, he used to give me free meat, which is pretty coveted over there. And my pharmacist would give me free like medication whenever I had, like, at first when I thought it was allergies and not psoriasis. And I just missed that sense of community. But luckily, like, you know, that's part of what drove me to Taqueria, was the fact that, like, man, the US is so like individualistic, and it's just hard to like connect with genuine people that just want to help others. That I'm really grateful that I found Taqueria.
Yeah, and then there was another question for Jose. Any book suggestions?
So there's not a whole lot of recent history. I have one called Violent Neighbors by Tom Buckley. He's a New York Times reporter. He does a really good overview, but it's a little outdated. There's also a professor from my American university, I think his name is Eric Ching, that has done a lot of really good research. He actually went to Russia once the Soviet Union ended, to kind of see how much of the you know, the history about the Communist Party helping the girls in El Salvador was true. And spoiler alert, not that much. And then I think if you have on Kindle Unlimited, they have a lot of good books about El Salvador that you can access there.
Cool, thank you. And then for Norma, it's not a question, but you know how you said you didn't really like, you got to a point where you didn't like admitting that you were Salvi. I feel like it reminded me that I used to get that too, where people would be like, "Oh, you're Salvi."
Yeah.
You look like they would be like, "Oh no, I don't like Salvis," and I'd be like, "Okay, but you liked me before you
Yeah.
knew I was Salvi."
I know, right? It's almost like ain't nothing wrong with me, you know, for being Salvi. But I think when you get a lot of that, you kind of start believing it, you know what I mean? And so it just kind of gets ingrained into your mind, especially like when you're a kid, you know what I mean, or a teenager. Like identity is so important, you know. And so when you hear people saying this about the place that you have raíces in and you have roots in, it does something to the psyche of a person, you know what I mean? And so I mean, obviously, as we get older, you know, we start learning more and we start getting that pride, but it definitely does a number on someone. And then especially like for me, because as I mentioned, you know, I'm Afro descendant. And so for me, it's like, they're like, well, what are you? You know what I mean? Like, you know, and there's this whole meme that's like, oh, well, you don't look Salvadorian. Well, what am I supposed to look like? A busa? You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, it's interesting how, you know, they say that in your 20s, you get to really know yourself and you become the person that, you know, that you are. But I feel for me, I'm 43. And so for me, it's like, I feel I've found myself more now than I ever did in like my 20s or my 30s, you know? So 40s is the new 20. I'm just saying it.
Yeah, I would definitely want to echo that sentiment. So like a lot of you all, there was a lot of what was said today that really resonated with me. I think Norma mentioned that one of the things was what I call like the boomerang pride effect that I had growing up. So just like a lot of you all, when people found out that I was Salvadorian, or like when they heard it and they made fun of like the way that I spoke, I did kind of like shy away from kind of like proclaiming that. So that was really tough for me. And then it wasn't until, I don't know, probably like 22, 23, when I came back from college, that I really understood the uniqueness of being or having those roots. And yeah, like going from not having essentially like any understanding or pride of like where my family came from to now being like proponent of like all sorts of things, everything Salvadorian basically, and everything Salvadorian American. That's something that was like super, super tough to come to terms with. There were like years where you don't really like identity wasn't like fully fleshed out yet. So to come back and have it be a full circle and have like a really good understanding of where my parents come from and who I am as a result of that is super, super powerful. So yeah, definitely. And I want to take like a moment to acknowledge and thank everyone who spoke today, because there's a lot of topics that are specific to like people just like us. And there were so many moments where I'm like, oh, I didn't want to cry on this call. Like, I don't want to do it. So yeah, thank you very much. It's very good to see everyone and see so many like new and old faces, and yeah, very powerful. Thank you all.
And you know what, and to say and to piggyback off of that, I think there's been this surge, and I've talked to this to Carlos about this when we did a podcast, that there's this surge now of Salvadorian pride, a lot more now than there ever was. So I am super happy to see that, because the kids of today, the generation now, they can grow up with more of that pride. You know what I mean? They can grow up and be like, you ain't gonna tell me anything because I'm Salvi or anything. Like it's tan más como in your face type of thing, you know what I mean? And I think, as somebody said, representation that matters. You know, you're starting to see, you know, because when you think about, like, for instance, in the media, in Telemundo and all this stuff, you see Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, like that's who is usually highlighted when you think of Latinos, but you don't really see that much of Central Americans, or, you know, but now you're starting to see that, you know, you're starting to see all these like Central Americans being highlighted, and it's like, hell yeah, you know, we're here, you know what I mean? And I think that's just, it's amazing to see that, you know, and again, I think it's representation matters, and representation in every color, because obviously, as you guys see too, Salvadorians, we come in all colors, you know, and yes, we do have an African history. It's there, you know what I mean? So it's nice to see that. That's one thing that I think it's nice to see that pride be more now than there ever was. And even, you know, it's, even if we didn't have it before back in the day, but now it's like we have that now. So, you know, at least now than never.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. One of the regrets that I have now is that for a long time I called like Salvadorians perennial second placers. Like no matter like where you are within the context of the US especially, like no matter where you are, there's always like one group that's like more like larger and more popular. And to see one of the biggest changes I've noticed in myself is like before I was like, hey, what's up? My name's Emerson, I'm Salvadorian. And now it's like, whoa, no, I'm Salvadorian. Like we're different, we're built different. Like this, we're not the same. So like the way that I say certain things now is like completely different. And like, yeah, ownership of all that took me a lot longer than I would have liked, but I'm here and we're all here and that's all that matters. And for all the negative things that we give, like social media, rightfully so, a lot of the time, like you can find a community in anything, and the Salvadorian community on Twitter and Tequeria, on Instagram, like anywhere you go now is like super, super vibrant and super like, I think just it feels like home, you know, as corny as that sounds, it feels like home. So yeah, the kids don't know now what we all went through, which is fine, whatever, as long as they have a safe space and like a space to connect with other similar people. Super, super important.
It's important to know also that, you know, we continue to be a growing community. I think we're up to like the third largest Latino Hispanic community behind, you know, Mexican, obviously, and then Puerto Rican, and then, you know, it's us and Cubans neck to neck. So the numbers are continue to grow, and it's like, I'll echo the comments. As an immigrant from El Salvador, came here, you know, in the mid 80s. It's awesome to be part of a community that, you know, keeps growing. It's positive, and we could talk about other things outside of what the outside community sees us as, beyond, you know, Mara Salvatrucha, which is probably the second thing that comes after you say, you know, Salvi. So it's great to see all of you doing great things and sharing your stories with us. So thank you.
Hi, I'd just like to jump on. I'm new to this group, and I'm super grateful for the organizers who put this together, because I'm just constantly looking for Salvadoran community. I follow Norma Perez on Instagram, and I'm so grateful for your content. Like, it just affirms everything I love about food, and that I'm not vegan, I'm not even vegetarian, but I just love your content, and I love seeing you like reclaiming Salvadoran heritage, reclaiming African heritage and Salvadoran culture. And like to Jose, who like shared your history. My dad is a huge history buff, and I guess I just want to like share a piece that I like my experience. I don't know if it's unique to where I grew up. I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and California is so huge. So, you know, a lot of us can have different experiences depending on where we grew up. And I grew up in a Salvadoran community in San Francisco. I grew up with Salvadorans. I grew up with folks who were ex-guerrilleros and who, you know, knew that history, and who were very proud of where they came from, of being working class, of, you know, fighting for what they believed in. And so it wasn't until college that I realized that there were covert Salvadorians, that there were people who pretended to be Mexican, that there were people who denied being Mexican. I didn't know that that was a part of people's upbringing in LA, especially I went to school in Southern California. And so I learned that this was going on, and I was like, what? Like I'm very proud to be Salvadoran. And also it had to do with, I had the privilege of my parents my mom moved me and my brother back to El Salvador because she wanted to go back to her country. When I was 10 years old, I went to 6th and 7th grade in El Salvador, and that completely impacted who I am and how I saw my parents and how I saw myself, and just the pride, and, you know, like you seeing your parents in their homeland versus seeing them here. It just gives you so much more sense of pride of who they are and who you are. And so I realized I have that privilege of seeing my parents in their home, like with their family. And so anyways, I just wanted to offer that experience too, because yeah, I'm grateful for folks who have done the work and like the research and like, you know, caring about learning about Salvadoran culture. And I don't know, I feel like it really affirms who I am to see other folks doing that too. So anyways, I just wanted to jump on and say hi and say thank you, and much love to everybody.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to share something?
I just want to say that I'm new to the group too, and I'm happy to be connected thanks to Maribel. So, and also I was born and raised in El Salvador, and I came to this country when just for college and then went back. And I fully relocated in 2016. So I fully understand the experience, and I was so thrilled to hear those stories. And also regarding Carlos, I think we have so much to talk because I think our families actually know each other. So there's a lot of history that I had goosebumps when I heard him talk, because I heard a lot of the same things with my grandfather. So thank you for just opening up this platform for everybody to connect in a level that is beyond the superficial, and just really connect with our roots and who we are and our struggles and experiences. So I'm happy to be here.
I just wanted to not take a lot of time at all, but this is incredible. I love what you were doing. Everybody's story is amazing and beautiful and really, 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 really moving for me. I share so many like similarities with everyone's story, just like we all do. And like Carlos, oh my gosh, so much love to you. Like yeah, just a lot of the things you said really resonated with me, and Norma as well, and Jose, like very powerful stuff. Sorry, I'm getting swept up in my emotion. Let me back up a little bit. What I'm saying is that am just now finding myself in a place where my life is stable, and I'm 37. It took like 40, almost 40 years to get here, and I'm just now finding, you know, a community of people that have experienced the same things that I have, and I'm just like, my heart is really full by seeing folks like you at Tequeria and at Salvis Unidos that are working towards bringing us all together and educating all of us. And so I'm just amazed. Thank you all so much for this, and I love you all dearly. This is invaluable. I love it.
Yeah, I was gonna add, can you guys hear me? So I'm originally from the Bay Area, so I really appreciate all the shout outs to the Bay Area. I grew up with a lot of Central American people. I moved to New York City like 4 years ago. So it's always funny, I feel like, having to explain to people where El Salvador is, what our background is. Shout out to someone that I think, Vilma, you mentioned that your kid is a proud Salvadorian. So I have a teenager, and since moving to New York, like, he will proudly say, like, I'm Salvadorian. You know, I think in California there's a large Mexican community, but here he's like, no, mom, I'm Salvadorian, you know. So I just appreciate having this. I just would love to have more of this, and just to hear other people's stories, because it's so important. There's a lot that my mom and dad missed out on because they moved here in the 70s when they were in their 20s, but I have so much respect for like what they did. And you know, we're a small country, but there's so many of us here, and it's, when we do find each other, it's so nice because we can understand all those little inside jokes that I think other people don't understand. So just wanted to thank everybody, and you know, shout out to everybody. If you're in New York, like, please connect with me, find me on Tequeria. Would love to connect.
Awesome, Adila. Thanks. Welcome to New York. Yeah, it's definitely hard to find Salvadorans out here in New York City, which is a part of the reason why New York Salvis Unidos NYC exists. So definitely look us up on Instagram, follow us. We have a lot of stories through our podcast as well. So yeah, definitely reach out, and we're hoping, you know, once this is all over, we can go back to in-person meetups in New York. Any other questions or comments, guys?
I just want to say that I think I remember when I was in Korea, I actually met two Salvadorians. One was in Korea and one was in Taiwan. And what's funny is both of them went to the same high school I did, had the same mentor I did, but we were 5 years apart in school. So I never met them until I was physically in in Korea and in Taiwan, right? And one of them said, I don't believe in being proud for things that you have no like authorship over, right? Like, what have you done for this thing that you can claim that I am proud of that thing, right? And I've always struggled with like reconciling that, like being proud to be El Salvadorian, like what authorship do I have over that? And I just want to say, like, having heard all these stories and everything, there was this one quote I saw at the museum in San Salvador about dedicated to the war. Like, I think it's run by an actual veteran of the war. And there's this quote, I think from Romero, that says, like, we should just be proud of the country that we come from and the people that we are. We have so much grit and resilience. All I heard today were 4 different stories of overcoming obstacles that were put in front of us time and time again. And we should be proud of that, because that's something we do have authorship. The fact that we continue that legacy of being a little pulgarcito that overcomes everything, right? So just much love to everyone.
I think one thing also that I want to say is, that we have a community, but that we really, truly support each other. Because there's one thing that I hear a lot, and it's an unfortunate thing that it's like, yes, we support each other, but then it's like, it's not really there. So when you say that you support your community and the people to truly do it, who cares about the competition? Who cares about any of this stuff, that it's meaningless? You know what I mean? Again, like Carlos said, we come from a small country that, we're resilient, and each and every one of us, we have our parents that have gone through so much and get beaten down, but yet they're still here. You know what I mean? They're still pushing forward. And guess what? We're now the legacy, you know what I mean? And we're still pushing forward, you know what I mean? So again, if anything, if I can leave with saying, to truly support each other and forget about all this other nonsense, because at the end of the day, we've always got, you know what I mean? So, actions speak louder than words. Support each other. There you go.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a good message. I saw someone ask about the difference between East Coast and West Coast. Norma, I know you talked a little bit about your experience on the West Coast. I know my experience on the East Coast being Salvadoran is a little bit different, but does anyone else want to share what their experience was like as a Salvadoran on the East Coast? Is everybody here from the West Coast?
Hey, Carlos. What's up?
Hey, Souhay.
So my name is Souhay Gutierrez. I'm an artist, and I was born and raised in Brooklyn. So I've been, I guess, in the East Coast all my life. And now I live out in the sticks in Patchogue, Long Island. And I do understand that there's a difference. It hasn't been until recently that I've been connecting with more Salvadorians. Up until like recently, all I've known has been my family being Salvadorian, until I moved to Long Island, and then I met like 5 other Salvadorian kids. So it's interesting because it seems like, at least from what I hear, there's like, you're wanting to be something else. And in my experience, I've never wanted to be anything else. So I've always embraced being Salvadorian. And if people had questions about it, I felt kind of like an encyclopedia. Well, I'm like, we're located here in between Guatemala and Honduras. And you have to be patient with people once in a while. But recently, like in the 2000s, I feel people are being more educated about it and are more aware. But I've always been like proud of my culture. I know nothing else because I guess my family has always taught me to be. And I didn't affiliate with other, like, my understanding is other people want to affiliate with other people. And I was okay just being, I guess, myself. And that's just my experience. I'm not saying that how everyone else lives their lives is wrong. But I mean, that has been my experience here in New York. And like people here embrace like they love the food, and I haven't felt any kind of like, I guess, resistance towards it, other than like I noticed like in the 90s, in the early 2000s, people would say, oh, do you have family from MS-13? And I would just stare at them and be quiet and move on to the next conversation. So that's basically how my experience has been here my whole life in New York.
Thanks for sharing, Souhay.
Thanks.
Anyone else want to share with a little bit of their East Coast experience?
Hi, everyone. My name's Rosa. This is my first time joining at Taqueria Talk. So I'm super excited that one specifically geared towards us was the start of it. So I'm super excited to be here. I'm a hybrid, I guess. I grew up in the Bay Area, and then I spent the other half of my life between Boston and New York. I grew up with a really vibrant Salvadorian and Central American sort of backbone and community, and, really embraced it. I had a mom who, she was a single mom of 7 kids, busted her ass, like made sure that we all had food, made sure that we were clothed, made sure that we had a house. And I took great pride in it. So I, damn right, I was like, yes, I am Salvi and I'm here. And I'm here to like make an impact. And, I took that hustle to the East Coast there as well. But what I found is I didn't have an avenue to connect. And, I'd find it when I'd run mandados, or when I was like, where in Brooklyn can I go get pupusas? And I'd find myself traveling, on the G train to the F train to find a spot in Sunset Park where I could like get down, play some, play some Rigoberto Tobal on a jukebox, have a beer, and eat some pupusas in the afternoon. So for me, it was just not being able to seek out the community. Where now I think maybe there might be a little bit more of an accessibility to it. But here on the West Coast, it's great to like walk with pride. It's great to be able to be here and connect with fellow Salvis. So thank you for being here, everyone. Oh yes, have a Pilsner, absolutely.
Una regia mejor.
I see in the chat, what's the name? Lucrecia. I don't know if you want to share. You said you grew up in Atlanta.
Sure, yeah. I actually grew up in suburban Atlanta. We moved in 1989, which was very different than I think people growing up in Miami, DC, or California or New York. There were no like Latinos in general. So people would always be like, are y'all speaking Mexican? What language are you speaking? Like, so lots of education of where I was from and everything. So it was a very different experience for me. I didn't even grow up around a lot of anybody that spoke Spanish at the time. But as you guys probably with the election and everything have seen, Georgia has changed so much in the last, 20 years of demographics. There's all kinds of immigrants. At the time, we only had, mostly predominantly white, large Black community, and then some Korean community. So it was a very different experience growing up in a part where there's, nobody even knew what El Salvador was. But it kind of provided some great opportunities. I would always do I remember one time in 2nd grade, I brought in pupusas and everyone was trying them, and it was just such a novel thing. So, but yeah, it's just very different, I thought, than, the typical places where we see a lot of salvadoreños.
That's so great that you brought your class stuff. I actually brought some for my coworkers one time, my teammates, and my team leader, he like folded it up like a taco, and I was like, no, no. No. That was fun.
I think before we go, I don't know how much time we have left, but before we go, I just wanted to mention that today is actually the anniversary of the assassination of San Romero. So I just wanted to kind of just point that out a little bit so we could reflect on that a bit. It's definitely a huge turnaround time, a huge impact, you know, an event heard around the world as far as Salvadoran history goes. But yeah, Marita, how much time do we have left?
Well, it depends if people want to keep going. We can keep it open until 6:30. Otherwise, we can go ahead and close it now. But yeah, thank you so much to all our speakers and to you as well, Carlos, for what's the word I'm looking for? Co-hosting with me.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for bringing up the idea and putting this together so we can you know, hold this event. I think in Tequeria, we're like all really focused on tech, and I think we don't always talk about stuff like this, right? I think it's really awesome that we were able to do a nation-specific event, and I'm looking forward to possible future nation-specific events for other nations, which I don't know very much about. So that'll be really awesome. Someone asked for how we stay connected after this. I think there's a Salvadoreños channel in Tequeria. There's also Salvis Unidos Instagram account. So you can look that up as well. So it's two good ways for us all to stay connected.
Yeah, and Alvaro Monge, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yes, hi everyone. Just on that note, in terms of staying connected, I thought we could try something. On the chat, it's up to you, right? Whatever you feel comfortable with. On the chat, put like what's your profession, number one, just so that, you know, maybe you want to connect with somebody because of that. And number two, de qué departamento vienen.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So profession.
I actually only recently learned where my dad's from, Chalate.
Oh, yo también.
Yeah, I used to, I mean, I'm sure he told me at some point, but I had actually forgotten, so yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm from. That's where I'm going on Monday.
That's cool. Be safe.
Thanks.
I know that somebody asked when I'm doing my cooking classes. So I had actually posted a post about like, what's your favorite? You have to choose one between nuegados, torrejas, budín, and pancakes. Got a lot of people like, don't make me choose. It's kind of hard to choose, right? So I am going to be doing cooking classes. Nuegados is the one that won, so Team Nuegados ganó. So I will, since basically my business is a one-woman business, so I do pretty much everything, but this year was my plan to really try to organize myself a little bit more. And with the cooking class, I am most likely looking at May for that because I have some things in April that I am doing. So maybe sooner, but I want to give like enough time for people to, you know, to sign up. But it'll be nuegados de yuca, of course, vegan. And as an extra gift, also a recipe for nuegados de calabaza. Now, if y'all haven't tried that, Lord have mercy, it's really good. So I definitely am excited for that. So just stay tuned and yeah, and cookbook, I'm trying to do that through shipping. So people on the East Coast, I actually am working with somebody from the East Coast. So she's a Salvi chef. She's sending me something. And so we're kind of right now sending each other some stuff to see how it works. Because I know people from like the East Coast and Texas and some other places They're like, girl, ¿cuándo vas a mandar la comida? So we're testing it out right now. So definitely wanted to do that this year para mandarles quesadillas, que pastelitos, que raw vegan chicharrones y todo eso. So stay tuned.
I've had some semitas shipped to me from California, so it could work.
Yeah, please let us know. I've been dying to try your food. Dying. But I'm gonna be out there in a couple months, so I'll probably have to go in person.
Okay. Awesome. Any other questions, comments? Stories you want to share? Funny stories? Sad stories?
No, I think it's just cool that you guys have a Slack group because I feel like the only person that I send jokes to is my brother. Like Buchica, or I think there's some videos that he always sends me. He's like, Salvadorians be like. So it's great to know there's like another community I can send those inside jokes to. But really, really missing torrejas, the fish that my aunt makes on Good Friday and stuff. So any of you have recipes, my family is the same, Carlos, they will ship the torrejas to me, send it priority mail, but I told them, don't worry about that. I'll just have to eat it when I get there.
Last time I was in El Salvador, I like regret it every so often. Is there was a shirt I saw that said puchica and then it had the definition on the bottom and I didn't get it because my aunt was like, no, $8, that's like too expensive. I really wish I would have got it because I haven't seen it anywhere else.
You should ask the guy from Guanaco to English to make one.
Oh, that's right.
Who is that?
And
it's the guy, his name, I forgot his name, but he has a dictionary. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Maybe I have it. A dictionary called Guanaco to English. That's, okay, hold on a sec. Let me get rid of that virtual background.
Oh, how cool is that?
It's all about Salvadoran slang aimed at extranjeros or diaspora, English-speaking Salvadorans. So you can learn all the caliche in El Salvador. It's a little pricey though, $8. So I don't know if you'll be able to swing that.
My aunt would not let me get that. No. That's really cool though.
He makes t-shirts too, I think. So could be a good ask for him.
On the subject of like t-shirts and restaurants and food, like how can we invest our money back into our community? And not just like mentoring people, like helping them get promotions, learn how to negotiate. Like, how do we continue to invest into the Salvadorian community? Like, Norma, one of my questions that I had for you was, do you have a restaurant? And then do you have a restaurant right now? Or is it just you're making food from your home?
So I don't have a restaurant. I know when I first started my business, I come from a choreography background. So I was a professional choreographer for like over 20 years. I did acting and performing and all that. And so when that career ended because of an illness that I ended up getting, unfortunately, I got into cooking and I thought, oh, well, cooking, maybe I can do a food truck because the restaurant, I have a lot of money to invest in that. So the food truck was like my thing, like, okay, but even that, it's like, again, it's just me. So I think I started my business in 2016, and I think as it's gone along, it's kind of changed a little bit. So, but that's the reason I wanted to start doing doing a cookbook, because I have 55 Salvadorian dishes that I've already veganized, and I'm trying to get to 100. And so doing a cookbook is definitely in the works. Video food content, because since I have a performing background, I love doing, the video food content stuff. So I know for sure I want to do that. Shipping, restaurant, I say no, but who knows?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So right now for me, it's just really doing my online stuff and doing cooking classes and heck, who knows, a cooking show? That would be that would be great too, you know. Again, I don't mind being in front of the camera, you know, or anything. So, but I say no right now. But again, I don't know where this path. I mean, from like 2016, it's gone a little bit different. So I know definitely cooking classes for low-income families was a definite thing that I wanted to do for sure. Yeah, so I think for me, it's just support is just liking, sharing, you know, anything that is done for like small business, you know, that is the way to keep this going. So
yeah, like do you have a YouTube channel that we can subscribe, like share it with our network?
Yeah, I actually, all my social media, I'm mostly on Instagram and not so much my Facebook, but everything is at the Salvi Vegan. So everything is the same. So from my Twitter to YouTube, I actually did do some YouTube videos, but they're not on my page. They're on somebody else's. And I know somebody was telling me like, Norma, why did you do that? Why did you give your recipe and do, you know, like they're getting the views, they're getting the subscriptions instead of you. Pero es que yo estaba ahí que, oh, you know, excited to do it. So I did it, but it is on my playlist. So if you go to my YouTube, I don't have any content yet because I'm finally getting a lot of equipment, like video wise, especially because I won the El Pollo Loco grant. And so that's helping me out, you know, so getting camera, sound, lighting, all the stuff that's required to do that. And I know you can do it off of your phone, you know, I've been doing my TikTok. Oh, TikTok también. Me encanta hacer eso.
Killing it TikTok.
Huh?
But you're killing it in TikTok.
Oh, thank you. It's my choreographer brain too that's kind of thinking with the beats of the music, you know, y todo eso. But yeah, so I'm getting all that equipment right now, and you know, so I can really like do this a lot better. So yeah, I go all over the place, as you guys see. That's why you see my captions, or when I write to you back, I write long like a novel. I'm sorry.
I look forward to your book coming out. You have to let us know where we can purchase it.
Yeah, I'm kind of like right now on the verge of like not sure if I should do the actual like hardcover or should I just go the ebook route, because since I have so many recipes that I've done, I have enough to do like a 3 series. So from like appetizers to savory foods to pastries to drinks, even some drinky drinks with infusing that with Salvi, you know, yes. So that's some other stuff, you know, so we'll see. But again, I think just as any other business, is just a matter of like sharing, you know, donating, just anything just that helps us all, especially when it comes to people like myself or others that don't really have much of the funds, you know, it helps us with just sharing or commenting and liking and all that stuff. It really truly helps us as a small business.
Another thing I
Just
try
real
to
quick.
do, oh sorry.
That's okay. Real quick, if you are interested in helping people in El Salvador, Kiva, you can go to kiva.org. I just learned about it recently. You can make like $25 loans to help people over there. It's an amazing app, and you get it back. And then the same $25 can then be lent out to somebody else, and you get to direct like who it's going to. So as soon as I found out about it, I'm like, oh, I'm all over this. So that's all. I put the link on the chat.
Another thing I try to do, if you're ever in a position at work, for example, that you need a contractor or something like that, there's a ton of Salvadoran contractors on Fiverr and Upwork, and you know they list their country. So I've actually, you know, I've ended up like mentoring a couple of people, so it can be pretty rewarding. And I think in general, you know, the Salvadorans are pretty tech savvy overall, I would say, especially the youth. So, but sometimes I think even, you know, teaching people down there how to do Scrum like could be super impactful. And I think that might be something where like I would almost want to challenge us, like, how can we like do some knowledge share with people in El Salvador?
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jose. Just want to share a little story. A while ago, this guy approached me. He was from Ecuador, and he's worked at the UN in El Salvador, not the UN, the embassy in El Salvador, and he had this idea about how a lot of Salvadorans get deported, but they're all like English speaking, and they don't have a connections down there, but they have a ton of skills. Like they might have a lot of construction skills. One example he gave me was a guy that was managing a Dunkin' Donuts for like 10, 15 years. So he had all this managerial experience, but like no way to use it in El Salvador because he didn't have the language of the connection. So his idea was to create kind of like a startup thing, like where you set up these I don't know how to put it. You connect the Salvadorans that are being deported to El Salvador with existing Salvadoran businesses, or help them like launch their businesses. So almost like an incubator to get people get back on their feet in El Salvador. But I'm not sure he ever got very far with that because of the pandemic. It's also like I have no idea how you go about doing that. But I just wanted to share just in case anybody here, you know, thinks it's a good idea or knows of a way to even start to execute that. I think it's a really awesome idea. Awesome way to help people that you know, have lost their homes here and been sent back to El Salvador. Yeah, call centers are one of the big big employers down there for both native Salvadorans and repatriated, I guess, Salvadorans. And yeah, they don't pay that great. I also want to share one more thing. I just want to shout out Estilo Salvi. He's in the meeting right now. He's also like a Salvi brand. And what impresses me most about what he does is you're sourcing your clothes from El Salvador, right? So you're partnering people down there rather than going on an online route like most people do.
Well, I was in the beginning. It was, but right now it's just difficult because it's just trying to get it over here, you know, and I've been using family. So they've been bringing a lot of stuff back for me, which has been helping. But I mean, it's like, you know how it is. It's limited to baggage and all that. So it's difficult. But what I have been doing is also finding just Salvadorians here, just like my screen printing guy. He's an old school Salvadorian, but man, super talented. I mean, just quality is on point and everything's great. So I still try to, even my designer's you know, Salvadorian. He's based in Florida, and just stuff like that. I still try to keep it, you know, 100% Salvi as much as I can, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, Blanca, when you asked that question earlier, I was wondering if you meant support the Salvi community here in the US or in El Salvador. Because there's definitely businesses out there that, you know, we can help from here. Some of them are difficult. You know, like getting the products over here can be like really difficult sometimes. And for example, there's one place called Belu Cacao, which has an amazing story. It's a like artisanal chocolate in El Salvador made with a revitalized cacao bean from El Salvador. Like these were like lost, I forget how many years ago, due to like a blight that just wiped them all out. And now most of the cacao from the world is grown in Africa, but it's a different kind of cacao. And there's like indigenous cacao in El Salvador that's been lost. And apparently someone found a lone tree in someone's old man's backyard, and the government actually decided to get it and revitalize it. So now we have this whole like line of Salvadoran cacao. And this lady is like, you know, a small business owner that's creating this really awesome chocolate, and it's delicious. Like, let me tell you, I'm not like a big chocolate person, but like her coffee, café con chocolate thing, chocolate bar, it's amazing. I was like blown away. And there's a vendor that was selling it here. But again, the biggest obstacle is the shipping. Getting it to the US, it's extremely expensive. So she's having a lot of trouble. So when I went down, I got a bunch of it. But if I find a link to it, I'll post it. Yeah, that's, you know, I'm always looking to support people both here and in El Salvador, because I feel like we always forget about, you know, the home country. We're always looking to help each other out here, which is great. But it just seems so far away. El Salvador does that. Sometimes it's challenging to see how we can help people over there as well. Yes, that's it. Baluka Kao.
Yeah, I had some of her chocolate when I went down in November. It was delicious, man. I mean, that's why I love your page also, man. It's just, you find all these incredible people, and it's just awesome to be able to, you know, help out and support any way possible. Thank you.
I'm so glad I joined the meeting, because I'm headed to El Salvador on Monday, so I can't wait.
Yeah, check it out. Definitely check it out. It's worth it. Absolutely worth it. They're a little expensive though, about $3 a bar. But if you can, if mommy doesn't yell at you for that, grab some.
Alvaro, where are you located? Are you in LA? So you can bring back some for us.
I am in LA. I'm in Long Beach. Yeah, I'm in the LA area.
I mean, can you bring some bars?
I gotta find where do I find the store? I'm still looking through the website.
I can reach out to her and let you know.
Yeah, I need an address. I need something so that
she's in a small
a kiosk.
No, not kiosk. It's a little like store in a mall with like strip mall with like super selectos and other stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I actually wanted to also that there is an organization in El Salvador that I'm a member of, Afros. So, you know, helping out that organization, it would be really great. Pretty much they're trying to get the rights and just fighting, you know, for Afro-descendants. Because I think in every country, Afro-descendants are recognized, pero ahí en El Salvador todavía no ha pasado, you know? And so if you guys can, let me see if I can put their, let me see. But yeah, if you guys can, you know, go support them. I know that there's una muchacha que está haciendo, que hizo camisa, you know, of Afro Latinx, and the net portions are going to, I think I did, can everybody see it there? I think I posted it. But you know, if you can go ahead and support the organization too, because they're doing a lot of work in trying to get this, because we've gotten a lot of anti-Blackness with a lot of our people in our community. And it's an unfortunate thing because, you know, it's one thing with, you know, like, okay, we don't see, but it's like, I mean, folks, it's there, you know? So yeah, definitely if you guys can follow and, you know, and go ahead and support our organization, because they're really trying to do a lot, especially in El Salvador, because they're actually over there in El Salvador.
Yeah, thank you everyone for sharing all these resources. I'll try and, so I'm gonna put the recording on YouTube, so I'll try and put all these resources in the description of the video. Yeah, if no one else has anything to share, we can go ahead and end the meeting. So, Carlos, any last words?
No, just thank you to everyone that joined. Thank you for being here with us, and for the speakers being so candid and so open and sharing their stories. It's definitely not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of courage. I know it was hard to be open about something that's, you know, so raw for a lot of us, but I think it was awesome that you did, because it helps bring us all together. A lot of us feel the same way. And a lot of us feel absolutely alone in this. And I think it's important to know that there's people out there going through the same struggles. So thank you guys for sharing. Thank you for the work you're doing. And yeah, we're all proud of you. You know, when you're out there, like, you're making El Salvador proud, but just being a good person. So keep it up, keep up the good work. And you're definitely putting El Salvador on the map just by being yourselves. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night. Thank you.
I